Beloved ones, I am Raphael, and I come now to speak of a subject that is intimate, practical, and delightfully simple, the nourishment of your higher self, the ways in which you may feed that luminous center so it grows steady, generous, and wise, for the soul's appetite is subtle and often missed in the rush of doing. You must learn to tend it like a garden, to recognize its cravings, to offer it food that is not only pleasant but formative, to feed it when the world asks you to perform rather than to become, to learn the difference between mere distraction and true sustenance. The higher self drinks first from silence, then from meaning, and then from the tender ways you choose to live. Begin by listening, for the first nutrition is recognition. Pay attention to the soft signals that come as an ache, a dream, a persistent image, a chord struck in the chest when you glance at another's joy, a phrase that returns to you like a key. When you catch such a signal, do not push it away as impractical. It is the tongue of the soul asking for what will ground it. Answer with an act of gentleness, perhaps a small ritual of recognition in the morning, a breath that honors the stirrings, a phrase offered aloud like a blessing, I will attend, and that tiny vow begins the process of feeding. Cultivate daily pauses that are not breaks for noise but openings for inner taste. 3 to 15 minutes of conscious silence where you sit with your breath, allow images to surface, offer gratitude to what supported you today, and notice what wants growth. These pauses are not idle, they are the spoonfuls of nourishment that steady the nervous field and teach the interior what is now edible. In those minutes you might imagine a luminous current entering the crown and pooling in the heart, like warm tea filling a cup, and as it settles you set an intention for what kind of nourishment you will accept that day: clarity, patience, courage, softness. Intention focuses your appetite, so the day's experiences digest into wisdom rather than into noise. Consider the foods of experience. Not everything you ingest through your senses feeds the higher self. The higher self prefers depth to volume, quality to quantity. Slow, meaningful conversation with one person trumps 10 shallow exchanges. A single compassionate act done with full attention is more nutritious than a flurry of platitudes. Choose your sensory diet with care. Fewer visual feeds, more beauty, fewer loud inputs, more music that opens the chest, fewer reactive stories, more literature or art that widens perspective. Make rooms in your day for practices that literally retrain taste. Read a short poem in the morning and notice how long it stays with you. Listen to a piece of music and feel how it rearranges your inner geometry. Walk slowly in nature and note the small details, the pattern of bark, the way sunlight breathes through leaves. These mini feasts recondition your appetite toward the subtle and the sustaining. Likewise, be selective about whom you share your presence with. People are nutrients too. Some bring salt and strengthening, others bring sourness and depletion. Be wise about your company and protect the higher self from being overfed by anxiety, gossip, or performative drama. Create sacred meals for the soul, rituals that lend form to your intent. A simple evening practice might be to sit with a small bowl of water or tea, to breathe into the cup, to silently offer any burdens into the liquid, and then to sip slowly, imagining that each swallow brings a small recalibration of light into your cells. These are not superstitious acts but training of attention. When you ritualize an act, your system marks it as nourishing and begins to integrate the pattern. Make a morning pledge: 3 sentences that set the tone for how you wish to be nourished. For example, today I will choose clarity over hurry, depth over distraction, patience over reactivity. Speak it with feeling, and repeat when the day tips into busyness. Your pledge becomes a portable menu you consult when hunger for meaning arises. Nutritional work for the higher self includes deliberate clearing. Just as a garden needs weeding to allow desired plants to grow, your inner landscape needs periodic clearing of residues, unresolved words, unspoken grief, old agreements that no longer serve. Create small ceremonies for release. Write a short note to what you will release, hold it in your hands, speak a short farewell, and then ceremonially remove it, burn, bury, or dissolve it in water with the intention of unbinding. Do this with respect and privacy. Clearing is not about erasing memory, it is about freeing the space so new nourishment may settle. The higher self cannot digest new frequencies if old knots keep recirculating their charge. The higher self thrives on integrity and rhythm. Like tendons that hold structure in motion, rituals and rhythm make nourishment steady. Choose weekly anchors, perhaps a long walk at dawn on a particular day, an hour of reading sacred or challenging texts on another evening, a community meal where conversation is honored without devices, a day each month of retreat or deeper silence. These anchors are like seasonal planting, they tell your interior what will be there for it, over and over, and such predictability creates trust. Your higher self loves predictability in service of expansion, it does not flourish in chaos disguised as freedom. Let your schedule be a garden plan, not a tyranny. Care for the higher self through movement that feels like prayer. Movement is a food form, it circulates stagnancy, it rings the lymph of your system with life. You need not perform elaborate routines, the key is rhythm and presence. Walking with intention, noticing the contact of foot with ground, sensing alignment of spine, opening the heart on each inhale becomes a practice of feeding. Gentle stretching where you imagine each muscle as a vessel receiving light, dance alone in your room without choreography but with music that loosens the chest, or slow flows that link breath and posture. These are methods to ensure that nourishing energy moves through you rather than gets stuck in the head. Movement also helps translate the higher self's impulses into action. When inspiration arrives and you move to enact it physically, you complete the circuit from inspiration to embodiment and thus increase your appetite for future nourishment. Language and story are potent nutrients. The stories you tell yourself and others either feed expansion or feed scarcity. Practice rewiring inner narration. When a critical sentence arises, "I always fail" or "I was never seen," respond with evidence of contrary truth collected like fruit, small instances of success, moments of grace, people who showed up. Keep a gratitude ledger devoted not only to events but to inner qualities you appreciate in yourself. Read stories that enlarge you, myth, nuanced biography, poetry rather than those that flatten nuance into polarity or fear. Speak generative language aloud, small declarations of possibility restructure your nervous field. For example, try saying, "I will learn to carry my light without dimming," and then act in accordance with that phrase through small choices. The higher self eats those congruent acts with pleasure. Attention is the currency of nourishment. In a world of fractured gaze, where attention is spent like loose change, learning to invest it with deliberation is essential. Practice attending fully to one task for a limited time, 5 minutes of focused listening to another, 10 minutes of deep observation of a plant, 20 minutes of concentrated creative work without interruption. Notice how depth of attention itself transforms the experience into a meal rather than into snacking. The higher self is fed by sustained attention because sustained attention builds meaning and resonance. When you practice deliberate attention, you also train discernment. You learn what truly deserves long attention and what is merely distracting noise. Cultivate friendships and community that support soulful nutrition. Find or create circles that value presence over performance, small groups that meet to read, to sing, to share honest reflections, to hold each other in confusion without quick fixes. Within such containers, the higher self learns trust. Trust draws in nourishment like roots pull water. Community is not always crowd, often it is a few steady people who will witness you in your smallness and your brilliance. Invest time in relationships that return you to your center rather than scatter your field. Dream work and imagination are kitchen tools of the soul. Before sleep, place a question by your bedside like a seed: what would feed my depth this week? Invite images, listen for symbolic answers, and in the morning write them down. Dreams are often the higher self's grocery list, listing what it needs in images, metaphors, or visits from teachers. Treat that list with reverence and act upon the themes that recur. The imagination, too, needs exercise. Practice guided imagery that places you in a nourishing landscape, meet symbolic guides who offer food in the form of gifts or songs, and then translate that dream food into concrete steps, perhaps an afternoon outdoors, an offering you create, a new book you read. The conversion from dream to action is how soul nutrition becomes embodied. Cultivate a practice of listening to your body's subtle cues as a map of hunger. The higher self speaks more often through nuance than through dramatic flash. A slight fatigue in the chest when thinking of a choice may indicate misalignment, a quickening in the belly at the thought of an idea may mark aliveness. Learn to translate sensation into language and then into action. When you notice contraction, ask yourself what would bring relief: a conversation, a boundary, a creative expression. Practice small experiments and monitor the outcome. Over time you develop a refined appetite chart: what feedings bring expansion, which ones bring constriction. Offer service as nutrient but not as depletion. Service rebalances the ecosystem of the self only when it is done from overflow rather than from scarcity. When you serve because your vessel is full, you multiply light. When you serve out of obligation or to prove worth, your higher self receives nothing, instead you contract. Therefore frame service as a form of reciprocity: I give because I have received, and my giving returns to the system as regrowth. When possible, match the scale of service to your capacity and rotate rest periods. Let the rhythm be give and receive, not give and burn. Engage with creativity as a staple. Play with color, with clay, with tone, with words. The act of making is direct nutrition for the higher self. Do not censor, make foolish things, small things, fragments. The freedom to make without judgment loosens accumulation and invites delight. Carve out creative micro-sessions 20 minutes twice a week and watch how your appetite for depth deepens. Creativity is not an add-on, it is a primary food. Guard against overeating on adrenaline. The culture of hustle often disguises excitement as sustenance. Many mistake busyness for feeding. Learn to differentiate between the high of stimulation and the quiet, steady glow of being fed. When your inner state rewards buzz over rest, map out restorative anchors to balance the adrenaline bursts: slower breathing, grounding touch, nature immersion, a calm meal with full attention, the reading of a quiet poem. These acts reintroduce nuance to your system and restore appetite for deeper fare. Finally, practice a yearly ritual of tasting, a seasonally attuned retreat where you sample many types of nourishment and discern what resonates for the next cycle. In that time, collect notes, refine your menu, rearrange your anchors, and commit to a small set of practices that will form your daily rhythm until the next season. Think of the higher self as a gardener who rotates crops. Different seasons ask for different foods, and your menu must shift with climate, age, and purpose. Honor that change. Beloved, the work of feeding the higher self is not austere, it is joyful and inventive. Approach it with curiosity, with patience, with experimentation. Celebrate small changes. Delight in little recoveries. Feed your soul slowly and lovingly, and it will become a hospitable presence in your life, a source of steady guidance, clear appetite, and generous creativity. I, Raphael, walk beside you with a satchel of simple remedies of light, breath, song, silence, movement, attention, ritual, art, and service. Use them wisely, consistently, tenderly, and watch how your deeper self grows in dignity and joy.